All I wanted was a quiet Christmas with family. Instead, I got a text saying dinner was canceled due to an ice storm. But the next day, Instagram told a different story. One filled with laughter, lights, and everyone except me. That lie shattered more than just a holiday. It revealed a lifetime of betrayal I could no longer ignore. The morning after Christmas, I sat in silence, staring at the cheerful Instagram photo my cousin had posted. My entire family was there smiling and laughing and clinking glasses while I had spent the day alone believing the celebration had been called off due to an ice storm. The betrayal clung to me like cold air wrapping itself around my chest. I kept rereading the message from my mother. She said everyone was staying home because of the dangerous weather and advised me to stay safe. I trusted her words without question. Even after all the times I had felt like an outsider, I had still hoped this year might be different. I had still believed her. Instead, they had planned the entire celebration behind my back. I had offered to help. I had volunteered to cook and decorate and even host the event myself if needed. My sister Anna assured me she had everything under control. She said she wanted to keep things small and perfect. I had thought she meant quiet. I did not realize perfect meant without me. As I kept scrolling through the photos, the captions felt like cuts to the heart. So blessed to be surrounded by love. Family first always. Would not be Christmas without this crew. Every smiling face and every dish on the table reminded me they had made room for everyone but me. I sat with that pain not just for the day but for everything it represented. This was not only about one holiday. This was about the birthdays I had missed. The family dinners I had not been told about. The times I was working late while Anna was praised for showing up with a bottle of wine and a smile. And even then I doubted myself. Was I overthinking it? Was there a reason I had been left out? Maybe they forgot. Maybe it happened quickly. Maybe there was some excuse. Anything to avoid facing the truth that had been staring at me for years. That was when the phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice sounded sweet and casual. She said she hoped I had a nice quiet Christmas. She said they had missed me. My hand tightened around the phone. I could barely breathe. That was the moment I stopped lying to myself. I did not know what I would do next, but I knew this with complete clarity. I was done pretending. I was done explaining. I was done accepting a version of love that only showed up when it was convenient. I did not answer my mother right away. I stared at the open photo on my screen while her words floated through the receiver like background noise. She talked about how relaxing it had been. She talked about Anna's decorations. She talked about everything except the truth. That I had been lied to. Finally I spoke. I said I had seen the photos. I said I knew Christmas had not been canceled. I said I knew they had all been at Anna's. The silence that followed was loud enough to fill the room. My mother cleared her throat and said it had been a last-minute decision. She claimed they had not planned it. She said they were trying to avoid any awkwardness. I could almost hear her twisting the truth into something she could live with. She added that I usually seemed uncomfortable at family events anyway, and that they thought I would prefer some quiet time. I felt my throat tighten, but I forced my voice to stay calm. I asked how long this had been happening. How many times had I been left out while they laughed together? How many times had they told me something was canceled when it had not been? My mother said I was being too sensitive. She said Anna was just more involved with the family. She said I always had my work. That is when the hurt turned into clarity. I remembered every Thanksgiving I had cooked for. Every birthday gift I had sent. Every holiday I had rearranged my schedule for. And all of it had meant nothing. They only saw what they wanted to see. And they had decided long ago that Anna was easier to love. I told my mother I needed space. She told me I was being unreasonable. She said she did not want drama. Then she hung up. For the rest of the day I sat in silence. I replayed the conversation in my head again and again. I felt anger. I felt sadness. But more than anything I felt something I had not allowed myself to feel in a long time. I felt done. Done trying. Done chasing. Done proving. That night I opened my laptop. I wrote a message to every member of my family. I told them I had seen the photos. I told them I knew the truth. And I told them I deserved better. I did not send it. Not yet. But the words were written. And that was the beginning. The next morning I opened the message again. I read it slowly word by word, feeling the weight of each sentence. My heart still hurt, but now it beat with something steadier. I was no longer trembling. I was no longer afraid. I added one line to the end of the letter. I deserve honesty. I deserve respect. Then I clicked send. Within minutes, my phone began buzzing. One message after another filled the screen. My aunt said she had no idea I was not invited. My uncle said it was probably all just a misunderstanding. My cousin, whose photos had revealed the truth, deleted her post and sent me a short message saying I was overreacting. Then came the response from Anna, a carefully crafted message full of sweetness on the surface and sharpness underneath. She said she had tried to make the evening calm and peaceful. She said she did not think I would enjoy it. She said she had done me a favor by leaving me out. I sat there staring at the screen for a long time, wondering how a person could be so confident in their cruelty and still think they were being kind. Later that evening, my father sent me a message. It was brief. He said I had made a scene. He said family matters should stay within the family. He said my email had caused embarrassment. He did not mention the lie. He did not ask how I felt. For a moment, I almost regretted it. Not because I thought I was wrong, but because I realized nothing I did would ever make them see me. Not really. That night, I received a message from someone unexpected. Rachel, an old family friend who had been close with my grandfather. She said she had seen the photos, then seen my email. She said she needed to speak with me in person. The next day, we met at a small coffee shop near my office. She looked nervous. Her hands trembled slightly as she passed me a thick envelope. Inside were papers, old bank records, and a letter. I read the first page and felt the air leave my lungs. My grandfather had left me an inheritance. A large one, meant to pay for my education and support my future. It had been quietly transferred to someone else. To Anna. I looked up at Rachel, my voice barely above a whisper. Why are you telling me this now? Because, she said gently, I cannot stay silent while they continue to hurt you. And just like that, the betrayal deepened. Not only had they lied to me, they had stolen from me. I held the papers in my hands, my fingertips brushing across the dates and figures. My grandfather had set aside money for me. Enough to pay for college, start a business, or buy a home. Instead, it had been rerouted slowly, deliberately. Rachel explained how she had been the financial advisor until she retired. She had trusted my parents as I once did. But after seeing what they had done to me, she could no longer carry the guilt of silence. When I returned home, I sat at my desk and reviewed every single document. The numbers lined up. Transfers labeled as business expenses. Payments to Anna's yoga retreats. Studio rent. Flights. Even wellness events in faraway places. Every luxury in her lifestyle had come from my inheritance. Not only had they taken my money, they had used it to build the image of the successful golden child while I had worked late nights just to cover student loans. It was not just money. It was identity. It was a future stolen from me without a second thought. I spent the next few days collecting evidence. I contacted the bank. I requested my grandfather's original will from the records office. Everything Rachel had told me was true. My parents had used a document I signed at 18, something they told me was for medical emergencies, to gain full control over my finances. They sold properties meant for both Anna and me, but the profits never reached me. All of it had gone into funding Anna's life. I remembered sitting beside my father in the hospital years ago, feeding him soup and updating his medical chart. I remembered my mother crying about bills. I had transferred money without hesitation. I had believed I was helping. I had believed I was part of a family, but they had seen me as a resource. Nothing more. I consulted a lawyer. Her name was Sarah and she specialized in financial fraud. After reviewing my documents, she looked me in the eye and said clearly, they broke the law. You have a strong case. You can pursue criminal charges. I sat in silence, letting her words settle around me. Part of me wanted to shout. Part of me wanted to cry. But what I felt most of all was resolve. They had tried to erase me from the picture. But now I was going to write myself back in. They had lied to me. They had stolen from me. And now they would finally face the truth. The plan came together quietly, with the precision I had always brought to my work. While they were posting curated family photos and pretending nothing had happened, I was building a case that would expose the truth. Sarah and I documented every transfer, every misuse of authority, every forged signature. I opened a private folder labeled Restoration, because this was not revenge. This was the start of rebuilding everything they had taken from me. I knew my parents well enough to understand they would never confess without pressure. So I gave them a choice. I arranged a meeting at my apartment, inviting my mother, my father, and Anna. I told them I was ready to talk, to move forward. They arrived with polite smiles and a hint of smugness in their voices, as if they had already decided how to spin the situation in their favor. My mother started the moment she stepped through the door. "We are glad you came to your senses, dear. Family is more important than drama." I said nothing. Not yet. We sat at the dining table where I had placed 3 folders, one for each of them. Inside were printouts of the bank records, the property sales, the forged documents, and a letter from Sarah outlining their legal violations and the consequences. I pushed the folders across the table. "Please read these," I said. They opened the folders. My father's expression shifted first, the calm mask falling into confusion, then alarm. Anna's lips parted as she scanned the numbers. My mother kept flipping pages, her smile frozen in place until it cracked. "This is nonsense," my father said, slapping the papers down. "No," I said quietly. "This is the truth. And I am giving you a choice. Return the funds, admit what you did, and we will settle this privately. Or I file formal charges." My mother leaned forward. "You would destroy your own family?" "You already did," I replied. "The moment you decided I was worth less than your image." Anna looked like she wanted to speak, but said nothing. I stood and walked to the window, letting the silence stretch between us. The room felt heavy, like a storm was about to break. "You have 48 hours, I said, still facing the glass. "If I do not hear from you, my lawyer will." They left without another word. For the first time I felt powerful in their presence. Not loud, not cruel, just certain. They had tried to erase me, but I was still here. The next 2 days were quiet. Too quiet. I knew them well enough to sense they were not preparing an apology. They were preparing a counterattack. On the second evening, my phone lit up with a message from Sarah. She had just received notice that my parents had attempted to move their remaining funds into private international accounts. A desperate attempt to hide the money before consequences could land. They were not going to choose responsibility. They were going to double down on deceit. That morning, I drove to the courthouse with a folder in hand. Inside was every document Sarah and I had gathered. I walked up the stone steps calmly, knowing this was no longer a matter of family conflict. It was fraud. It was theft. And I was done protecting them. Within hours, the authorities acted. Warrants were issued. Their bank accounts were frozen. I received a call from Rachel, her voice shaking with disbelief. They tried to pressure her into retracting her statement. She stood firm. And now she said she was willing to testify in court. By the next day, the news had spread. My father was removed from a community board he had chaired for years. My mother's charity club revoked her invitation to their holiday gala. Anna's yoga studio website went dark. The family group chat turned into a firestorm. Aunts and uncles I had not heard from in years began messaging me with confusion and disbelief. Most of them had only heard the version my parents had crafted. But now the evidence was public. First, I ignored their messages. I did not need their sympathy or their outrage. What I needed was distance. Then something unexpected happened. My cousin Leah, who had always been a quiet observer in the family, messaged me privately. She told me she had suspected something for years. The way they dismissed me. The way Anna's failures were framed as brave experiments. Leah apologized for not speaking up sooner. Her words were the first soft thread in what had always been a frayed and one-sided family fabric. As the legal process unfolded, my parents began scrambling. They offered partial payments, excuses, even emotional pleas about the shame this had caused them. But it was never about shame. It was about power. And they had lost it. I walked into Sarah's office that Friday with the final set of evidence in hand. She looked up from her desk and smiled. "They underestimated you," she said. And now, I said, they are going to understand what that costs. The trial date was set for spring. But the fallout began much earlier. Local newspapers picked up the story. A respected accountant exposing a financial scheme involving her own family made headlines that traveled far beyond our small circle. Friends from college, colleagues from past jobs, Even former professors reached out to offer support. Their messages warmed something in me that had long gone cold. The public exposure forced my parents and Anna into a corner. Their perfect image shattered. No more carefully posed family portraits or inspirational posts about togetherness. Their faces were now linked with headlines about betrayal and fraud. And yet, even now, they did not express remorse. Their statements to the press were filled with denial. They claimed misunderstanding, confusion, even victimhood. Anna insisted she had no idea the money came from my inheritance, despite clear transaction records showing otherwise. Still, I did not waver. My lawyer Sarah advised me that they were attempting to negotiate a deal behind the scenes. Partial restitution in exchange for avoiding jail time. I agreed to consider it, but only if it included a full confession and formal acknowledgement of the truth. Not just for legal purposes but because I needed it. I needed them to say in black and white that they had taken from me, lied to me, and profited off my sacrifice. 3 days before the deal deadline, I received a letter in the mail. It was handwritten, the familiar looping script of my mother. For a moment I considered tossing it aside. But curiosity pulled me in. Inside were 3 pages. Not quite an apology, but not a denial either. She wrote about pressure. About fear. About her own regrets as a mother. She said she wished she had loved me louder. Supported me better. She admitted that I had always been the reliable one, the one they leaned on. And somehow that had made it easier to overlook me. I read it twice, then set it aside. Later that night, I took a walk under the stars. The air was cold but sharp with clarity. My childhood had been full of effort, of pleasing, of swallowing hurt. But this chapter was mine. And I had chosen truth. The next morning, Sarah confirmed the deal had been accepted. Full restitution. Assigned admission. A permanent legal record of what they had done. I did not celebrate, but I did exhale. It was not justice in the storybook sense, but it was freedom. And for the first time in years, I finally felt like I could begin again. Spring arrived with a quiet grace. The legal process wrapped up with little fanfare. My parents and Anna kept their distance. There were no more phone calls or emails, no attempts at reconciliation beyond the deal they had been forced to sign. For once, the silence was welcome. I moved into a new apartment with tall windows and warm light. I bought real furniture for the first time instead of second-hand pieces. I painted the walls in soft colors that made me feel calm. I filled the shelves with books I loved. Every item I placed was a reminder that this space was mine. Not borrowed. Not temporary. Not a placeholder for a life I was trying to earn from someone else's approval. My career began to bloom in ways I never expected. The publicity surrounding the case had made waves in the accounting world. Invitations arrived to speak at seminars about ethics and financial transparency. A university reached out to offer a guest lecture opportunity. I said yes to all of it. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to use my voice. For so long I had stayed quiet. Now I spoke clearly and without apology. One afternoon in May I received a package. No return address. Inside was an old family photo. I recognized it instantly. My 7th birthday. I was smiling wide with frosting on my face while Anna looked bored beside me. Tucked behind the frame was a short note. It read simply, "I hope someday you will forgive us." There was no signature, but I knew it was from my father. I set the photo aside without emotion. Not out of anger, but because I no longer needed it. I had already forgiven them in the only way that mattered. By choosing to live without their shadows over me. Later that week, I attended a charity gala as a featured guest. I stood in a crowded ballroom surrounded by professionals who respected my work and my strength. As I looked around the room, I realized I no longer felt like the invisible one. I was no longer the forgotten daughter. I was a woman who had claimed her truth and built something powerful from the ashes of deception. And then came the moment that truly closed the chapter. On the way home, walking past a quiet park lit by warm lamps, I realized I was not waiting for their next move. I was not bracing for guilt. I was simply walking forward, on my own path, no longer needing their validation, only my own. A year had passed since that cold December morning, when a single text message shattered the illusion I had clung to for so long. I no longer measured my worth by invitations never sent or calls never made. I no longer wondered if I had done something wrong. I knew the truth now. I had simply stopped playing a role in a family script that had never been written with me in mind. On the anniversary of that day, I chose something different. Instead of sitting in silence or reliving the pain, I hosted my own gathering. Just a few friends, some neighbors, colleagues who had become like family. We drank cider and shared stories and laughed until our sides hurt. There was no tension, no performance, no pretending. Only warmth. At one point, I stepped outside for a breath of air. Snow was beginning to fall, light and slow, catching in the trees like powdered sugar. I looked up and felt something shift in my chest. Not grief, not anger, just peace. I had made it through. I was no longer the girl left out of the picture. I was the woman who had taken the camera into her own hands and decided to frame her life with purpose. I had faced betrayal and loss, but I had also found strength, clarity, and above all, freedom. As the door behind me opened and someone called my name with laughter in their voice, I smiled to myself. This was my family now, not built by blood but by choice. And that made all the difference.